The night was humid, the streets buzzing with restless energy. Inside a cramped MMA gym, fluorescent lights flickered, humming like broken wires. The staff moved quietly, cleaning sweat from the mats, stacking gloves. But then, disrespect. A fighter, drunk on ego, lashed out. His hand cracked across the cheek of a young staffer, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. Silence fell. Faces froze. Eyes turned. For a moment, it seemed the fighter's arrogance would stand unchallenged. But outside, shadows stirred. A street savage, no belt, no contract, just raw survival, had been watching. Seconds later, the alley outside would host a justice no referee could stop. The slap was easy. But karma came with fists carved by the streets. Where are you watching the video? Comment, and if you like the video please subscribe and like the channel. The sound lingered in the air. Sharp. Violent. A slap that cut through the hum of buzzing lights and the muffled rhythm of jump ropes hitting the mats. For a split second, everything stopped. Even the heavy bag, swaying from a fighter's last kick, seemed to hang in stillness. The young staffer's cheek reddened instantly, his eyes wide, his lips trembling as he staggered back. He hadn't expected it. Nobody had. The arrogance of the fighter hung in the room like smoke, thick and suffocating, choking any words that dared to rise from the stunned crowd. He stood tall, his chest heaving with pride, his eyes scanning the room as if daring someone to challenge him. No one moved. Not a sound. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights, buzzing like insects. The slap wasn't just flesh on flesh. It was humiliation. It was a mark meant to remind the boy, and everyone else, that in this world, power was taken, not earned. The staffer clutched his face, eyes burning. He wanted to scream, but the sound refused to escape his throat. Around him, whispers began to surface. Uneasy murmurs. The shuffle of feet. But no one stepped forward. Not the coaches. Not the fighters in training. Fear froze them. Or worse, complicity. The fighter smirked. His voice dripped with venom. Maybe now you'll learn respect. The words pierced deeper than the slap itself. They weren't just directed at the staffer. They were aimed at everyone in the room. He wanted to remind them all of their place beneath him. His dominance was not in question. At least, not yet. A man in the corner, older, wrapped his towel around his neck and shook his head. He had seen men like this before, prideful, untouchable, feeding off intimidation. Men who believed the cage had made them kings. But outside, shadows stir differently. Outside, there are men who live by survival, not contracts. And one of those shadows was waiting. But for now, inside the gym, the silence weighed heavy. The staffer lowered his eyes, ashamed, humiliated in front of the very fighters he once looked up to. His hands shook. He wanted to strike back, but the imbalance of power crushed that thought before it was born. This was no fair fight. This was a statement of dominance. And no one dared disrupt it. The crowd dispersed slowly, pretending to return to their routines. Gloves laced tighter. Bags punched harder. But every blow was hollow, every movement stiff. No one wanted to draw attention. No one wanted to be next. The atmosphere was poisoned. The fighter, basking in the silence he had created, walked to his locker with deliberate steps, each one echoing against the concrete floor. His smirk lingered, satisfied. He believed he had won something intangible: fear, respect, control. But he had only lit a fuse. Outside the gym, the street hummed with a different energy. Cars rolled by, headlights slicing through the humid night air. Somewhere down the block, music thumped from a bar, muffled by distance. But closer, just beyond the gym's door, eyes watched. A figure leaned against a brick wall, arms folded, jaw tight. He had seen everything through the cracked doorway. The slap. The humiliation. The arrogance. His name didn't matter here. On the streets, names meant little. What mattered were actions. And his actions had been forged through years of raw survival. He wasn't bound by rules, by commissions, by referees. His fights had no rounds, no weight classes, no belts. Just survival. And in survival, arrogance like the kind displayed inside that gym didn't last long. He lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating scars etched across his knuckles. Fists that had told stories in alleys, in backyards, in bars where respect was currency. He took a drag, exhaling slowly, watching the smoke drift upward, curling into the night. He wasn't looking for a fight. But some things demand response. Some injustices cannot be left unanswered. Inside, the staffer finally slipped away, retreating toward the back door, his head bowed low, avoiding eye contact. His cheek burned, both from the slap and the shame. He thought no one had seen. But the street savage's eyes tracked him, sharp, unblinking. The door creaked open. The staffer stepped into the night air, his breath shaky. He wanted to cry but refused. He wouldn't give the fighter that satisfaction. He leaned against the wall, trying to steady himself. The street savage flicked his cigarette to the ground and crushed it under his boot. "You gonna let him do that to you?" the man asked, his voice low, gravelly. The staffer's eyes snapped up, startled. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His lips trembled. The savage studied him for a long moment, then shifted his gaze toward the gym. His jaw clenched. Some men think power is taking from the weak. But real power, he flexed his scarred hands. Real power doesn't need to prove itself with a slap. The staffer opened his mouth, then closed it again. He wanted to speak, but the words stuck. The savage stepped past him, toward the gym entrance. His steps were calm, but each one carried weight. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't stepping in for glory. He was stepping in because he couldn't stand the stench of arrogance. And tonight, that stench was suffocating. Back inside, the fighter laughed with his teammates, mocking the silence of the room. His voice carried, sharp and loud, cutting across the tension like a blade. He believed himself untouchable. But as the gym door creaked open again, his laughter faltered. Heads turned. The room stilled. The street savage stepped in, his eyes locked on the fighter. The gym seemed to shrink around them, walls closing in, air thick with anticipation. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The hum of the lights returned, loud, unbearable. The savage didn't need to say a word. His presence was enough. His eyes, cold and unflinching, told the fighter everything he needed to know. Arrogance had met its reckoning. The fighter smirked again, but it was weaker now, forced. "What? You got something to say?" he spat, trying to reclaim his dominance. The savage tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. The silence stretched, pulling tighter, suffocating the room. Finally, he spoke, quiet, steady. "I don't talk to cowards." Gasps rippled through the gym. Faces shifted. The staffer's eyes widened. For the first time since the slap, hope flickered in the room. The fighter's jaw clenched. His pride screamed for retaliation. He couldn't allow disrespect in his own kingdom. Not here. Not in front of his audience. His fists tightened, veins bulging across his forearms. The savage remained still, patient, like a predator waiting for the inevitable mistake. His breathing steady, his eyes never wavering. The fighter shifted, taking a step closer, his shadow overlapping with the savage's. Two worlds colliding, the polished cage fighter against the raw chaos of the streets. The crowd braced, hearts pounding. They knew what was coming. They didn't know how or when, but they knew the air was seconds away from igniting. And then, the sound of glass shattering from somewhere outside snapped heads toward the window. Just a brief distraction. But when their eyes turned back, the distance between the two men had vanished. They stood face to face, barely inches apart. The fighter's smirk cracked, replaced by something else. Uncertainty. The savage leaned in, his words barely audible, but sharp enough to slice through the tension. "You slapped the wrong man's world." The fighter's fists tightened. His pride demanded blood. The crowd held its breath. And in that fragile silence, the fuse burned closer to the explosion waiting. He didn't come from gyms. He came from corners where streetlights flickered and the air smelled like burnt oil and wet pavement. Respect wasn't written on banners or shouted by coaches. It was taken, kept, and defended in silence. He learned young that faces appeared and disappeared like ghosts, and the only constant was the sound of fists on bone. He didn't keep trophies. He carried scars. They traced his knuckles like crooked rivers, each one a memory carved into skin. Nights when the silence was heavy, broken only by a breath turning sharp, a bottle rolling, or the scrape of shoes in the dark. They called him many names, none real. To a bartender who patched him with whiskey and duct tape, he was Sir. To boys trailing at a distance, he was Mr. To men who tested him, he was the last thing they saw before swallowing teeth. He whispered to himself, 25 years, no apology owed to a bully. He didn't fight for crowds. He fought to erase silence. When he saw the slap inside the gym, he felt it ripple outward like an insult to every corner of the city. That sound didn't just humiliate the boy. It mocked the code of survival. Arrogance inside cages is entertainment. Arrogance outside them is poison. A slap, in his world, was never forgotten. Dignity demanded collection. The savage leaned in the doorway long enough to breathe the room. Sweat. Disinfectant. Fear. The fighter's laugh scraped across the walls like a dull blade. Around him, men dropped their eyes. Coaches found excuses to shuffle gear. Fear froze them. Worse, some smirked, complicity painted on their faces. The savage felt the weight of their silence pressing as heavy as any fist. He walked in slow, deliberate. He had no trainer behind him, no commission above him, no manager selling him. His only companions were his rules. Never start it, never step back, never leave injustice unchallenged. Tonight, the rules bent. This wasn't about choice. It was duty. The boy met his eyes. His cheek still glowed red, his jaw trembling with swallowed rage. He looked away quickly, drowning in shame. The savage stopped beside him. "You good?" he asked, voice low. The boy nodded too fast. "I'm good." But the words cracked like broken glass. The savage moved on, the way a river flows around stone. The fighter stood tall at the center, chest bare, tattoos shouting louder than his mouth. Strength without responsibility had a stench, sweet, rotten, and unmistakable. The savage remembered it from alleys, from nights when men thought fear was their property. He remembered the first one he ever put down, a giant drunk on power. He paid with blood and teeth but walked away with freedom. Fear never owned him again. He stayed near the wall, eyes locked. He didn't need the spotlight. He wanted the fighter to feel the weight of his presence. And when their eyes met, the gym shrank. A coach coughed. A jump rope faltered. The fighter smirked, mistaking silence for consent. "You lost." "No," the savage said. "I found you." Gasps flickered. A teammate chuckled nervously. The savage didn't blink. He watched posture, not words. He measured breath, not bravado. The fighter twitched, impatience leaking through his muscles. "You want a piece?" "No," the savage said calmly. "I want a correction." The word cut sharp. The fighter rolled his neck, but the bravado rang hollow. The room shifted. Men avoided eye contact. The boy straightened just slightly, a flicker of hope in his chest. The savage's code whispered in his ear, "Pride blinds, arrogance deafens. Watch shoulders, not mouths." The fighter's pride screamed louder with every second. The savage turned to the crowd. "You saw it. You heard it. Do you agree?" Murmurs spread like dust. Some muttered excuses, "Not my problem." Others whispered about contracts, sponsors, connections. Their words were weak, dissolving in the heavy air. The fighter smirked wider. "That's right. They know who runs this place." The savage tilted his head, as if consulting a judge unseen. Then softly he said, "Outside, we'll let the street decide." He walked to the door. Not retreating. Inviting. Past bags swaying, past posters bleached pale, past trophies that glittered hollow. He stepped into the night where the city breathed hot and restless. He stood beneath a streetlight, its halo painting the ground dirty and sacred. And he waited. He didn't pace. He measured the night with stillness. He thought of the boy, his dignity slipping like water through fingers. He thought of the slap replaying in shame's loop. He thought of every time injustice smirked at him and walked free. He would not let it walk tonight. The gym door cracked. The boy emerged first, breath uneven. "I didn't want trouble," he said softly. "Trouble already wanted you," the savage answered. "He just delivered the bill." The boy's voice shook. He's ranked. He's connected. They'll fire me. They can fire a job, the savage said. They can't fire respect. The boy swallowed. Why you? The savage's eyes flickered with something distant. Because I remember being you. The door groaned again. This time it was him, the fighter, pride stitched across his shoulders, teammates fanning out behind, phones already lifted like blue moons in the night. He stepped into the light, smirking. You forgot you were a guest. The savage's voice was steady. I'm no guest. The street is mine too. Laughter echoed. The teammates spread, forming a horseshoe. Cameras blinked awake. The savage ignored them. He studied hands, posture, breathing. He saw pride choking the fighter's judgment. You get one chance, the savage said. Apologize to the boy. The fighter blinked, stunned by the word. His smirk faltered, then returned sharper. Nah. The savage nodded, almost like a man ending a prayer. He shifted weight, squared hips, loosened shoulders. The alley of justice waited behind him. A horn blared somewhere distant, stretching tension like wire. The boy stepped back. The teammates leaned closer. Phones tilted higher. The fighter's foot slid forward, pride sharpening into challenge. But before fists flew, the gym owner's voice tore through the night. Not here. Take it around the corner. No cameras. The circle wavered. Teammates hesitated. The savage didn't move. He let the fighter decide. Pride chose quickly. Around the corner then. The savage turned first. The alley smelled of cardboard and old rain. Darkness closed in, shadows curling like witnesses. A bottle rolled, clinking to rest. He stopped beneath dripping brick, the air damp with history. He glanced back once. The boy stood at the alley's mouth, fists clenched, hope burning reckless in his chest. The footsteps came, steady and proud. Teammates whispered, "Don't break your hand." Laughter followed. The savage smiled in the dark. Hands heal. Dignity doesn't. The fighter entered, shoulders wide, chin lifted. His voice opened to speak. But the silence answered first. The alley was narrow, the kind of place where secrets clung to the bricks and echoes outlasted men. A single light buzzed overhead, casting a pale circle on wet pavement. Beyond it, shadows swallowed everything whole. The savage stood in the center, still as stone, while the fighter strutted forward, his entourage trailing just enough to film without interfering. Pride demanded witnesses. Justice demanded silence. The fighter cracked his neck, the sound sharp against the dripping pipes above. "This where you want it?" he asked, smirking, arms wide like a king presenting his throne. The savage didn't answer. His eyes scanned, posture, balance, breathing. He watched the twitch of a shoulder, the tightening of knuckles. The fighter was ready to perform, to put on a show for phones and followers. The savage wasn't here for performance. He was here for correction. The boy lingered at the alley's mouth, torn between fear and need. He wanted to see it. He needed to see it. To know that dignity could be defended, that humiliation wasn't a life sentence. His fingers dug into his palms, nails biting flesh, as the savage shifted his weight just slightly. The fighter laughed. "What's your deal, old man? Looking for clout? You think dropping me gets you a ticket?" His voice dripped arrogance, each word sharpened for effect. His teammates chuckled, feeding the fire. Phones hovered, blue light reflecting on eager faces. Finally, the savage spoke. His voice was quiet, steady, but it carried through the alley like a verdict. "You slapped a boy because you thought no one would answer. I'm your answer." The smirk cracked. The fighter scoffed, shaking his head. "You're serious. Dead serious." The crowd shifted, uneasy laughter mixing with whispers. The savage's tone wasn't bravado. It was something heavier, something undeniable. The fighter spat on the ground, then raised his fists. "Fine. Let's dance." The first movement came fast. The fighter lunged with the confidence of a man used to controlled spaces, measured mats, referees, rules. His punch sliced the air, heavy with power but wild with pride. The savage slid just enough, letting the fist brush past his cheek. The sound of air rushing filled the space. Calmly, almost lazily, the savage tapped the fighter's ribs with a short counter. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to warn. The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, laughter. Phones angled closer. The fighter's eyes burned, anger replacing confidence. He charged again, this time with fury, fists flaring in a storm of hooks. The savage blocked with forearms, shifting his stance like water slipping through cracks. Each blow landed against resistance, not weakness. The alley filled with sound, fists slamming, breath tearing, feet scraping wet concrete. The savage absorbed the chaos, then let it settle. He waited for the rhythm. Pride makes men predictable. Rage makes them clumsy. And then it came. The fighter overextended, shoulders wide, chin exposed. The savage's fist shot forward, precise, fast, brutal. The crack echoed through the alley, louder than the slap that started it all. The fighter staggered, stunned. Phones dropped momentarily as onlookers froze. The savage didn't press. He stood still, letting the silence weigh heavy. "Apologize," he said, voice calm, eyes locked. The fighter wiped blood from his lip, disbelief crawling across his face. He looked at his team, searching for strength. Pride wouldn't allow surrender. Never. The savage's jaw tightened. The code whispered. Some men only learn when pride is shattered completely. He stepped forward. His fists weren't wild, weren't reckless. Each punch landed like punctuation. Sharp. Final. The sound of flesh meeting flesh reverberated off the walls. The fighter's breath grew ragged, his balance slipping, arrogance cracking. Still, he swung. Still, he refused to fall. Pride screamed louder than pain. His teammates shouted encouragement, but none dared step forward. Fear chained them in place. They knew stepping into that circle wasn't safe. Respect doesn't protect cowards. The boy's eyes widened. For the first time, he saw arrogance punished. He saw power crumble under justice. The slap replayed in his mind, but now it ended differently. His humiliation was being rewritten before his eyes. The savage caught another wild swing, twisting the fighter's arm, forcing him down to his knees. The concrete scraped skin, blood mixing with dirt. The savage leaned close, his breath heavy, words sharp. "Apologize." The fighter spat again, pride dripping with blood. "You're nothing." The savage released him, stepping back, shaking his head. "Then nothing just broke you." He raised his fist once more. The fighter struggled to rise, wobbling, teeth clenched, jaw swelling. His pride wouldn't allow surrender, but his body betrayed him. Every stagger, every gasp, every bruise told the story clearly. Arrogance was collapsing. The alley pulsed with tension. The boy leaned forward, fists still clenched. The teammates whispered, unsure whether to film or flee. Phones trembled in their hands. And then, sirens. Distant, faint, but growing. Red and blue lights flickered at the end of the street. The crowd panicked, scattering. Phones shut off, voices silenced. No one wanted to be caught. The fighter's team dragged him back, their faces pale, bravado shattered. The savage stayed rooted, calm, unflinching. The boy ran to him, eyes wide, breath sharp. You stopped him." The savage shook his head. "No." I reminded him. "There's a difference." The boy nodded slowly, though his heart still pounded. The sound of sirens grew closer, the night vibrating with their approach. The savage looked down the alley, then back at the boy. "Don't forget this. Power without respect is weakness in disguise." The boy swallowed, the words carving themselves into memory. He would not forget. The fighter, dragged away by his team, screamed promises of revenge, voice cracked and hollow. His pride had taken a beating worse than his body. And revenge, whispered in rage, is a dangerous seed. One that grows in shadows, watered by humiliation. The savage knew it. He had seen it before. Men don't forgive the lesson. They plot. They conspire. And when pride teams with corruption, battles don't stay in alleys. They climb into rings, into contracts, into the hands of men who profit from injustice. The sirens swelled, reflections bouncing against brick. The savage turned, his silhouette dissolving into shadows, disappearing the way he arrived, quiet, unclaimed, unforgettable. The boy looked after him, jaw set, heart heavy. He understood now, justice isn't clean. Justice leaves scars. But scars carry stories. And somewhere, beneath the flashing lights and the hum of fear, a new story began forming. One that wouldn't be contained by alleys. One that would bleed into cages, into headlines, into the very heart of a corrupt system. The slap had sparked it. The alley had fueled it. But the war, the real war, was only beginning. Morning broke with no mercy. The city stretched awake, sunlight spilling across rooftops like gold smeared on rust. But inside the gyms, inside the promotions, inside the whispers between fighters and managers, the slap and the alley fight had already grown into legend. Phones carried shaky footage. Screens replayed blurred punches, muffled shouts, the final moment when pride hit the pavement. A street savage breaking a professional fighter, uncertified, unlicensed, uninvited. The video spread like gasoline on dry streets. Fans argued, voices clashing across message boards and bars. Some called it justice. Some called it assault. But all agreed on one truth: the cage wasn't big enough to contain what had begun. Two worlds, polished sport and raw survival, were now on a collision course. The fighter sat in silence, jaw swollen, ice pressed against bruised ribs. His pride hurt worse. He watched the replay over and over, each view igniting fire deeper in his chest. His teammates avoided eye contact, their loyalty strained. He whispered to himself, 25 years of training, undone by a man with no gloves, no license, no name. His rage demanded restitution, not just in fists but in reputation. His manager leaned close. "Don't worry. We'll spin this. The street doesn't own the cage. We do." The words dripped with confidence, but beneath them lay fear. Promoters smelled opportunity. Blood, humiliation, injustice, it all sells. The fighter was their investment, and now his pride was leverage. The savage had stepped out of the shadows, and they wanted to drag him into the light, even if it meant twisting contracts, bending rules, and corrupting truth. Meanwhile, the savage remained unseen. He walked alleys the same way he always had, his scars hidden beneath long sleeves, his silence unbroken. To him, the fight was already finished. Justice delivered. Lesson taught. But the world refused to let it end. Cameras hunted him. Journalists begged for names. Promoters whispered about the perfect storyline. They wanted a ghost to walk into their ring. The boy, still nursing the humiliation of that first slap, found himself torn. He replayed both moments, the shame and the redemption. The slap that crushed him, the savage who avenged him. Hope clashed with fear. What if they twisted it? What if they dragged the savage into the machine, turning justice into entertainment? His stomach churned with unease. Inside smoky bars, conversations simmered. He embarrassed him clean. Nah, it was a sucker punch. That savage, he's dangerous. The commission won't allow him. Then why's everyone talking about it? Each voice added fuel. Each whisper built tension. The city pulsed with anticipation, the kind that precedes storms. The fighter returned to the gym, arrogance cracked but not destroyed. He trained harder, sweat dripping, fists slamming into pads with desperation. He needed revenge. Not for himself, he told his reflection, but for the sport, for respect, for order. But deep down, it was personal. Every punch was aimed at the face of the man who exposed him. Every kick landed against the silence that mocked him in the alley. The savage didn't chase cameras. But cameras chased him. Footage of him walking, silent, expressionless, appeared online. Headlines screamed, "Street Justice versus Cage King." Corrupt promoters began dialing phones. They saw dollar signs where others saw scars. They weren't interested in fairness. They wanted spectacle. And spectacle sells more than truth. The boy heard whispers, backroom deals, offers to locate the savage, money promised to lure him into a contract. He approached the savage one night, his voice shaking. "They're looking for you. They want you in the cage." The savage exhaled smoke into the dark. "Not my world. They'll twist it," the boy warned. They'll paint you villain, him hero. The savage's eyes narrowed. Let them paint. Paint doesn't change steel. But inside, he felt the weight pressing. The fight hadn't ended. It had only grown larger. Two worlds, bound by corruption and pride, were steering toward each other. The cage wasn't built for justice. It was built for profit. And when profit smells blood, nothing stops it. One night, the fighter stood before cameras, his face still bruised but his voice loud. He caught me off guard. That's all. Put him in a cage with me, under rules, under lights, and I'll end this street myth. No more shadows. Just me and him, man to man. Cheers erupted from his supporters. Promoters grinned, their eyes glowing with dollar signs. The narrative was set. A street savage turned villain, a fallen fighter turned avenger. Injustice doesn't always hide, it sometimes dresses as opportunity. The boy watched the broadcast with dread. He felt the manipulation dripping through every word. They weren't telling the truth. They were twisting it, rewriting humiliation as accident, turning arrogance into victimhood. His hands shook with anger. He whispered to himself, "This isn't right." The savage heard it too. The words reached alleys, whispered in bars. Men he didn't know approached him, urging him to answer the call. You can't let him spin it. You need to finish it. The cage is where legends are made. But legends never fed him. Legends never protected him. Legends never paid his rent or erased scars. He didn't need lights or applause. But something deeper stirred. Justice. The boy's face. The silence of the gym. The laughter that followed the slap. Some things don't fade. Some things chase you until you turn and face them. At night, he walked past the gym. He heard the pads slamming, the grunts of effort, the voices chanting encouragement. He saw the fighter inside, relentless, his body forged in preparation. Pride drove him. Corruption fueled him. And the savage knew, sooner or later, their paths would cross again. The city itself seemed to lean in, waiting. Fans demanded answers. Promoters pushed contracts. Corruption whispered promises of money, fame, redemption. The cage loomed ahead, not as a place of sport, but as an arena for justice, twisted and packaged for profit. The savage stood at the edge of the city one night, staring at the horizon, smoke curling from his cigarette. His voice was barely a whisper, but the night heard him. Two worlds can't walk the same street. One will break. The boy approached, hesitant. Will you fight him? The savage's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Not for them. Not for money. For the slap. The boy nodded slowly, the weight of destiny pressing between them. He knew the clash was inevitable. Two worlds colliding, one of rules, contracts, and corruption, the other of raw survival, justice without permission. The fuse had already been lit. And when worlds collide, explosions follow. The arena hummed like a beast awakening. Thousands of voices swirled in the air, heavy with anticipation, thick with anger, curiosity, and bloodlust. The promoters had done their work well. Billboards blazed with images, one of a polished fighter with championship credentials, jaw clenched, eyes fierce, the other of a shadowed figure, his scars blurred but his reputation sharpened by myth. Street Savage versus Cage King. It wasn't just a fight. It was a spectacle. The lights dimmed. Smoke curled across the entrance ramp. Music thundered. The fighter walked first, pride stitched across his face, hands taped tight, gloves shining. He moved with swagger, every step rehearsed, every glance calculated. The crowd cheered, not for justice, but for violence packaged neatly inside rules. Cameras followed his every move, capturing his smirk, his jaw still bearing faint traces of the alley's memory. Tonight, he wanted erasure. And then the music shifted. Low. Ominous. No spotlight burst, no confetti. Just silence stretching before the crowd broke into scattered shouts. The savage appeared, walking slowly, no robe, no entourage. His hands were bare until officials forced the gloves on backstage. His face carried no smile, no scowl, just steady eyes. He didn't come for applause. He came because unfinished business had dragged him here. The crowd erupted, some booing, some chanting, all hungry. The commentary spun the narrative, a reckless brawler, dangerous but unproven, against a trained professional, a victim of circumstance seeking redemption. Corruption had written the story in bold ink, but the savage didn't care. Stories fade. Truth lands in fists. The bell rang. The first moment stretched, time thick with tension. The fighter circled fast, bouncing, showing footwork, jabs snapping out like testing sparks. The savage stood calm, still, eyes locked. He didn't waste movement. He didn't flinch at feints. He watched shoulders, hips, breathing. The fighter grew bolder, throwing combinations, crowd roaring with each strike. Gloves thudded against the savage's guard, some slipping through to graze cheek and ribs. The fighter grinned, shouting mid-combo, "You don't belong here." The savage didn't answer. His silence was heavier than words. His fists coiled like storms waiting for the right crack in the sky. And then it came. The fighter lunged with a wide hook, overconfident, hips turning too far. The savage slipped inside, shoulders tight, and unleashed. His fist connected with the fighter's jaw, sharp, brutal, unforgiving. The sound cracked through the arena louder than the crowd, louder than the music. The fighter's head snapped, legs buckling. The crowd gasped. Phones dropped. For a heartbeat, the entire world seemed to freeze on the image of pride collapsing under raw precision. The fighter stumbled, eyes dazed, smirk gone. He staggered back, clutching the cage wall. The savage didn't chase. He stood center, breathing steady, eyes cold. The crowd roared, divided, half screaming in disbelief, half exploding in awe. The commentary scrambled. "He caught him! He caught him!" The fighter shook his head, anger replacing dizziness. He spat on the canvas, a streak of blood staining the floor. He charged again, desperation driving him, fists wild. The savage absorbed, deflected, waited. He didn't need frenzy. He needed one more opening. Another exchange. The fighter's gloves hammered against the savage's arms, each strike echoing desperation. The savage countered sharp to the body, ribs folding under impact. Breath escaped the fighter in a guttural groan. Still, he refused to fall. Pride screamed louder than pain. The crowd was on its feet, chants mixing chaos into music. "Save Age! Save Age!" clashed with "Cage King! Cage King!" The noise thundered like war drums. The cage shook with fists pounding from the outside. This wasn't sport anymore. It was theater of survival. The savage moved forward slowly, deliberately. Each step a reminder, arrogance has a price. He feinted left, drew the fighter's guard high, then hammered low to the liver. The fighter gasped, folding, but pride forced him upright again. His eyes blazed with fury. He swung wild, a desperate uppercut. The savage leaned just enough, feeling the air kiss his chin, then drove his fist down the center. The fighter collapsed, sprawling across the canvas. The crowd exploded, screams tearing the roof open. Officials leapt, referees circling, but the savage stepped back, hands down, no need for follow-up. His message was already written. But the fighter wasn't finished. Against logic, against his own body, he clawed to his feet, wobbling, teeth clenched, pride dragging him upright. The referee looked ready to wave it off, but the fighter shoved him aside, shouting hoarse, "I'm not done!" The savage tilted his head, respect flickering for the refusal to quit, but pity rising for the cost it carried. He stepped forward, fists loose. The crowd held its breath. The boy watching from ringside leaned forward, eyes wide, heart pounding. The fighter stumbled forward, swinging blind. The savage slipped once, twice, then landed clean across the cheek. The fighter spun, collapsing into the cage, arms dropping. The referee dove in, waving it off. The bell rang furiously. The fight was over. The arena erupted, chaos, disbelief, jubilation. Some screamed justice. Others cursed robbery. Phones flooded the internet with replays, hashtags igniting like wildfire. The savage stood still, chest rising slow, face unreadable. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't shout. He just looked at the boy, eyes locking for one brief second. The boy nodded, tears burning, dignity restored. But beyond the noise, corruption stirred. Promoters whispered in dark corners. A street savage humiliating their prize asset wasn't part of the script. They would not let it stand. Contracts could be twisted. Judges could be bought. Narratives could be rewritten. Tonight, fists had spoken. Tomorrow, pens would conspire. The fighter was dragged from the cage, his pride shattered but his eyes promising revenge. He wasn't done. He couldn't be. Pride never dies quietly. And with corrupt hands guiding him, his downfall would not remain his alone. It would spread, infecting everything the savage touched. The crowd still roared, but beneath the sound, the air grew heavy. Justice had landed its first blow. But injustice never sleeps. And in shadows behind the lights, the next betrayal was already being planned. The bell had rung, the referee had waved, but the echoes refused to die. The arena still trembled, voices clashing, some chanting for the savage, others drowning in disbelief. The air was thick, suffocating, the smell of sweat, blood, and smoke hanging like fog. Yet inside the cage, silence grew heavier than the noise. The savage stood motionless, hands by his sides. He didn't raise his fists, didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. He only breathed, steady, calm, as if the fight had ended hours ago. His eyes drifted across the canvas where the fighter lay slumped, pride shattered, body broken. Trainers swarmed him, pressing ice, shouting orders, voices panicked. His jaw swollen, his breath ragged, but his eyes burned with something darker than pain, hatred. The crowd screamed for interviews, for explanations, for soundbites. Microphones pressed against the cage, commentators calling for a statement. But the savage gave them nothing. His silence screamed louder than words. He turned once, his gaze cutting through the cameras, through the chants, straight to the boy watching ringside. Their eyes met. The boy nodded, small, almost invisible, but in that moment it carried more weight than all the cheers combined. Then the lights dimmed. Not for ceremony, not for show. For control. Officials rushed in, voices sharp, movements frantic. Something was wrong. Whispers spread, promoters shouting at commission staff, lawyers huddling in corners. This wasn't the ending they wanted. This wasn't the narrative they'd scripted. A street savage had walked into their house, broken their champion, and left them with ashes. The announcer stammered, stalling, repeating lines. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for both fighters," his voice cracked, drowned by boos and cheers colliding. The arena was chaos, but beneath the noise, a deeper silence pressed, the kind born of fear, suspicion, conspiracy. Backstage, the fighters' team stormed through corridors, shouting, phones pressed to ears. "He embarrassed us. He embarrassed you." The words weren't just to promoters, they were to anyone who could be bought, anyone who could rewrite what fists had already written. The fighter, leaning on two men, jaw wrapped in ice, spat blood onto the floor. His voice came low, venomous. "This isn't over. He won't walk away clean." The savage walked opposite, calm, unmoved. He refused interviews, pushed past microphones. He wasn't there for headlines. He was there for the slap, for the boy, for justice. And justice, in his eyes, was already delivered. Yet as he moved down the corridor, men in suits shadowed him. Whispers followed. No license. Illegal. Liability. They weren't congratulating. They were plotting. In the locker room, silence wrapped itself thick. The boy entered quietly, his steps hesitant. He found the savage sitting alone, gloves half-laced, sweat dripping like rain. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the boy's voice broke the silence. "You did it." The savage looked up, eyes heavy. "No. He did it to himself." "But you stopped him," the boy pressed. His voice carried gratitude, awe. The savage shook his head. "For now." His tone was steady, but shadows curled around his words. He had seen this before. Men beaten in fists, rising through corruption. Power shifting behind closed doors. Justice rarely lasting. The boy sat beside him, the room humming with faint pipes overhead. "They're already twisting it," he whispered. "I heard them. They'll call it luck. They'll call it dirty." The savage exhaled, slow, heavy. "Let them talk. Silence outlives noise." But deep down, he knew silence wasn't enough. Corruption doesn't fade, it festers, grows, and strikes again. Out in the arena, chaos spread. Fans argued in aisles, fists swinging, security swarming. Phones flooded social media, angles of the knockout looping endlessly. Hashtags trended, comments raged. Some called the savage a hero. Others demanded his arrest. The line between justice and crime blurred under the weight of opinion. In a dim suite above the chaos, promoters sat around a table, suits gleaming under sterile light. Their voices were cold, clipped. "He humiliated our fighter. We can't let him walk away." Another leaned forward, hands clasped. "Spin it. Call it unsanctioned. Call it dangerous. Strip it of legitimacy." The room nodded. Their champion couldn't be tarnished. Profits couldn't bleed. Justice would be rewritten, smothered under paperwork and headlines. The savage left through a side exit, the boy following close. The city air was damp, streets reflecting neon, puddles glowing red and blue. Sirens wailed distantly, horns blared. Yet the night itself felt silent, as if holding breath. The savage lit a cigarette, smoke curling upward. The boy spoke quietly. "They're not done with you." "They never are," the savage replied, voice low. "Men like that don't lose clean. They only lose in shadows." The boy frowned. "So what now?" The savage's eyes scanned the street, expression unreadable. "Now we wait. But when silence breaks, it always breaks loud." Across the city, the fighter stared into a mirror, his reflection fractured by swelling bruises. He whispered, teeth clenched, "He stole from me. He stole everything." His manager leaned close. "Then take it back. Not in the cage. Outside it. Where no referee can save him." The silence following the fight had birthed something darker. Revenge. Conspiracy. Corruption tightening like a noose. The savage knew it, the boy feared it, and the fighter demanded it. The crowd had screamed, the arena had shaken, but beneath the noise, injustice was plotting its return. And when injustice plots, silence is only the calm before the storm. Long before the slap echoed in the gym, arrogance was already carved deep into the fighter's bones. His story didn't begin in shadows, it began under lights, the kind that burn hot and blind young men into thinking they're invincible. He was a prodigy. Quick hands, sharper kicks, and a mouth even faster. Crowds loved him because he gave them what they wanted, blood and bravado. After his first knockout, he shouted into the mic, "Nobody can touch me!" And for years it felt true. One opponent after another fell, some fast, some slow, but all eventually broken. He strutted across cages like a king, draped in sweat and glory. But glory is a dangerous drug. He swallowed it whole. Every cheer became validation, every headline a crown. His gym became his kingdom. Coaches coddled him, promoters fed him, sponsors threw gold at his feet. He believed himself untouchable. Yet behind the lights, arrogance grew rot. He skipped training sessions, confident his raw power could cover every gap. He mocked sparring partners, humiliating them in front of younger fighters. If a coach corrected him, he laughed. "You need me more than I need you." The words carried weight, because they were true. The gym's reputation rested on his fists. Nobody dared push back. At press conferences, his insults drew more clicks than his punches. He turned opponents into jokes, mocking accents, mocking families, mocking scars earned in silence. When a journalist questioned his lack of discipline, he sneered, "Results speak. Look at my record." The crowd laughed. The journalist went silent. But arrogance is patient. It doesn't destroy in one night. It waits, festers, corrodes foundations until the first crack breaks everything. The first crack came in a fight many forget. A journeyman, nameless to most fans, lasted longer than expected. The fighter's hands dropped, his mouth opened, taunting. A counter slipped through, wobbling him. For a breath, the crowd gasped. But pride saved him. He stormed forward, flurries overwhelming the journeyman until the referee pulled him off. He celebrated like a champion, but inside, fear whispered. He ignored it, buried it under more arrogance. His entourage grew. Men who laughed at every joke, women who chased his glow, businessmen who called him the future. Each one feeding the illusion, each one sharpening the edge of his pride. He became addicted, not to the fight, but to the throne. One night, after another victory, he stormed out of a bar. A fan asked for a photo. He shoved him aside. Cameras caught it, headlines spun, but promoters silenced the noise. Bad press is good press, they said. The machine protected him, the same way it had for countless others. Power insulated him from consequence. He started to believe he could do anything. Coaches whispered concerns about his conditioning. He ignored them. Sparring partners left the gym, tired of being props in his show. He shrugged. Plenty of replacements. And then came the first real loss. A rising contender, disciplined, relentless, walked him down. His arrogance betrayed him, hands too low, chin too high. The knockout was brutal. Headlines screamed. 4 weeks, he vanished, hiding in silence. But silence didn't change him. It only hardened his pride. When he returned, his words dripped venom. Fluke. Lucky shot. He'd never do it again. He demanded rematches, demanded recognition, demanded cameras. His arrogance didn't shrink, it inflated, fueled by desperation. Back in the gym, he punished staff for minor mistakes. Gloves misplaced. Yelling. Water bottle warm. Insults. A young trainer once suggested new drills. The fighter slapped the clipboard from his hands. You don't tell me what to do. I tell you. Laughter echoed from his entourage, cementing his cruelty. The boy who later caught his slap had been there that night, sweeping mats in silence, pretending not to hear. He remembered the humiliation painted on that trainer's face. He remembered the fighter's smirk. That smirk became legend inside the gym, a reminder of who was king. As the years passed, arrogance became armor. He needed it because inside, cracks widened. He no longer dominated as easily. Younger fighters pushed him harder. Fans questioned his discipline. Rumors spread of nights spent drunk, fights outside clubs, debts whispered about in shadows. He covered it all with louder words, harsher insults, bigger promises. But arrogance can't mask fear forever. The slap inside the gym wasn't born that night. It was a lifetime of unchecked pride boiling over. He saw the boy not as staff, not as a person, but as a reminder that his world was slipping. He lashed out to prove control, to reassert dominance. And when silence followed, when no one stepped forward, he believed his arrogance had triumphed again. But arrogance always miscalculates. It never considers the shadows watching, the scars listening. It never imagines that justice might arrive uninvited. That night in the alley shattered his illusion. For the first time, arrogance failed him. The savage didn't flinch at insults, didn't bow to reputation, didn't care about the machine that protected him. One fist shattered the myth he had built for decades. And worse, the cameras caught it. Pride broke, not in silence, but in front of thousands. Now, as he sat with swelling jaw and fractured spirit, flashbacks haunted him. He saw the journeyman who almost beat him. He saw the trainer he mocked. He saw the boy's face, red from his slap, and the savage's eyes, cold, unflinching. Each memory carved deeper, each humiliation feeding the fire of revenge. Arrogance had built him. Arrogance had protected him. But arrogance had also betrayed him. And now, it demanded redemption, no matter the cost. His manager whispered in his ear late that night. They'll pay you double for a rematch. Triple if we spin it right. We'll get the judges, the refs, the promotion. All you have to do is show up. Let the machine do the work. The fighter's eyes narrowed. He tasted blood in his mouth, bitterness on his tongue. He whispered back, voice hoarse. I don't care what it takes. I want him broken. Not just beaten. Broken. In the silence of his hotel room, screens replayed the knockout. Over and over, he watched his pride collapse. His fists clenched, veins bulging, heart pounding. He whispered again, to himself this time. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. And in that whisper, corruption found fuel. Promoters smiled in shadows. Judges nodded in secret meetings. The machine spun, already greasing wheels for betrayal. The clash had moved beyond fists. It had entered the realm of contracts, politics, power. The savage didn't know it yet, but his silence was about to be drowned in noise, his justice strangled by corruption. The fighter's arrogance, scarred but alive, had transformed into vengeance. And vengeance is never quiet. The savage never asked for respect. He took it the only way he knew, through fists and survival. His code wasn't written in books, not carved into gym banners or recited by coaches in corners. It was written in blood, sweat, and scars left behind in alleys where no referee ever blew a whistle. He grew up where silence was heavy and the nights were louder than the days. Sirens howled like wolves, bottles broke in the dark, and men settled debts with fists because words weren't enough. His first fight wasn't for glory, it was for survival. A boy twice his size cornered him behind a liquor store. No crowd. No coaches. Just cracked pavement under his feet and the smell of trash in the air. He didn't win clean. He didn't win easy. But he walked away, and in his world, that was victory. That night gave birth to his code: never start it. Never step back. Never forget the weak watching. Years turned fists into tools sharper than knives. Every scar a reminder of lessons learned the hard way. A crooked jaw from a tire iron taught him to never underestimate desperation. A split eyebrow from broken glass taught him to never turn his back. Broken ribs taught him to breathe through pain, to move with silence. He carried these lessons like scripture. Others bragged about belts. He wore scars like rosaries. The gym crowd didn't understand men like him. To them, fighting was career, entertainment, business. To him, fighting was air. He didn't need contracts or lights. He needed only justice, balance. When arrogance walked unchecked, he answered. Not because he wanted glory. Because he couldn't let it rot the streets that raised him. His code demanded it. The boy who had been slapped once asked him, "Why risk it? Why step in when you don't have to?" The savage had answered with silence at first, staring into the smoke curling from his cigarette. Then he said, "Because I remember when no one stepped in for me." That was the truth. His childhood was full of slaps that went unanswered. Men with power crushing boys with nothing. Teachers who turned away. Police who looked the other way. Every silence carved anger into him until fists became his only answer. He fought not to prove strength but to erase silence where it didn't belong. He never chased money. When promoters whispered contracts, he shook his head. He didn't want to belong to them. They wanted to own his fists, to package his justice as entertainment. But his fists were not for sale. He told the boy once, "The moment you fight for money, you stop fighting for truth." But truth is costly. It left him wandering, always an outsider. He drifted from gyms, never staying long. Fighters respected him but feared him too. Coaches avoided his gaze. He wasn't controllable. And the system hated what it couldn't control. Still, whispers of his code spread. Bartenders knew him as the man who never hit first but always finished last. Street kids whispered stories of him standing up for a homeless man beaten behind dumpsters. Others remembered him breaking the jaw of a lone shark who shook down a single mother. His fights didn't make headlines. They made legends. But legends attract enemies. Police marked him as a threat. Promoters painted him reckless. And now, after breaking their prized fighter, the machine was gearing up to erase him. He knew it. He felt it in the silence after victory, in the way officials avoided his eyes, in the way promoters whispered like serpents. The boy noticed it too. "They'll come after you," he said one night. "Not in the cage. Outside it." The savage nodded. "Let them. I've been hunted before. Men with badges, men with suits, it doesn't matter. They all bleed." The boy frowned. "But this time it's bigger. Cameras. Money. They'll twist everything." The savage's eyes narrowed. "They can twist stories. They can't twist truth. When my fist lands, there's no spin." The boy wanted to believe him, but fear lingered. The machine was powerful. It controlled headlines, controlled judges, controlled contracts. Could one man's code survive against such weight? The savage didn't ask that question. He lived by something simpler. If you see wrong, you make it right. That's the rule. No excuses. His code was both shield and curse. It gave him purpose, but it also painted a target on his back. Promoters saw a wild dog they couldn't leash. The fighter saw humiliation he couldn't forgive. And corruption saw opportunity to destroy him, to profit from him, to twist him into a villain for their storylines. But the savage was unshaken. He carried silence like armor. When men insulted, he didn't answer. When promoters dangled money, he didn't blink. When the fighter promised revenge, he only said, "Pride never learns until it breaks twice." The boy watched him closely, fascinated by the calm. He asked one night, "Don't you ever get tired?" The savage paused. His eyes carried years heavier than words. "Every day. But tired men still fight. Because if we don't, who will?" That was his truth. His body ached, his scars burned in the cold, but his code kept him moving. It wasn't choice. It was duty. Yet duty doesn't protect. In smoky rooms, promoters schemed. Judges were whispered promises. Contracts prepared, not for fairness, but for manipulation. They wanted him in their cage again, not to celebrate, but to break him on their terms. The savage knew it was coming. He didn't fear it. He only prepared. His code didn't allow retreat. He told the boy, "They'll come. And when they do, I'll stand. Like always." The boy nodded, though his stomach twisted. He saw the storm brewing. The savage's fists could silence arrogance, but could they silence corruption? Could one man's code survive a machine built on lies? The savage lit another cigarette, smoke drifting into the night. His voice was low, but steady. "Respect isn't given. It's taken. And once you take it, you never hand it back. That's the code." The boy stared, knowing he was watching not just a man, but a creed carved in flesh. And somewhere in the shadows, corruption sharpened its knives, waiting to test whether that code could be broken. The night after the fight, the city slept uneasy. Screens still glowed with replays, debates raged online, and whispers spread in gyms and bars. But in offices high above the streets, lights burned late. Men in suits leaned over tables, contracts spread, voices sharp. Their champion had been broken. Their machine had been mocked. And the man who did it had no license, no leash, no fear. By morning, the knock came. Hard. Cold. 3 raps on a rusted door that echoed through the hallway like a sentence being read. The savage opened it slowly. 2 officers stood there, badges glinting under tired eyes. Behind them, a third man lingered in a tailored suit, face expressionless. "You need to come with us," one officer said. No explanation. No warrant shown. Just authority, raw and heavy. The savage didn't flinch. He pulled on his jacket, lit a cigarette, and exhaled smoke into their faces before stepping into the hall. The boy, startled awake by the noise, rushed out. "What's happening?" The officer's tone was clipped. "Questions. Nothing more." But the boy saw the way the man in the suit smiled, thin, crooked, smug. This wasn't about questions. This was about control. At the station, the silence was thick, broken only by the buzz of old lights and the scratch of pens on paper. They didn't charge him, didn't book him. They just left him in a room with a single chair, metal cold against his back. Hours passed. No water. No answers. Just silence, pressing, waiting. Finally, the door creaked open. The man in the suit entered, carrying a file. He placed it on the table and slid it across. Inside, photos of the fight, headlines, contracts. His voice was smooth, oily. "You embarrassed the wrong people." The savage said nothing. His silence was defiance. The man leaned closer. "You don't belong in cages. You don't belong in gyms. Men like you, men without papers, without contracts, you belong in cells. Unless," his smile sharpened, "you start playing by the rules we write." The savage's eyes narrowed. His cigarette burned low, ash trembling. "Your rules are chains." "Chains pay well," the man countered. "Chains protect you. Otherwise," he tapped the file. "Assault, illegal combat, endangerment. We can bury you." For the first time, the savage spoke clearly. "Try." The man's smile faltered. He closed the file, stood, and left. The officers returned minutes later. "You're free to go." No explanation. No paper trail. Just silence heavier than before. Outside, the boy waited, pacing. His relief was sharp when he saw him. What did they want? Chains, the savage muttered. He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. The boy understood. Word spread quickly. The savage had been taken in, questioned, released. Fans argued again. Some said it was proof he was a criminal, others said it showed fear from those in power. In bars, men whispered of backroom deals, of promoters pulling strings, of police bending to money. Truth twisted with rumor until no one knew the difference. The fighter watched the news from his hospital bed, jaw wired, ribs bruised. His eyes narrowed as he listened to commentators call the savage dangerous, reckless, a street thug who got lucky. His manager leaned close. See, they're already shaping the story. Soon, nobody will remember the punch. They'll remember the villain. The fighter's lips curled. Good. Let him carry the weight. The boy begged the savage to disappear, to leave the city before the machine crushed him. They'll twist everything, he warned. They'll turn you into the villain, and people will believe it. The savage's voice was calm. I don't run. Not from men. Not from machines. Days later, the authorities returned. This time, not with questions, but with papers. Sanctions. Investigations. Fines. Legal words stacked heavy, each one crafted to bury him under bureaucracy. He didn't fight the papers. He didn't sign either. He just stared at them until the officers grew uneasy and left. The boy asked, "What will you do?" "Same as always," the savage replied. "Stand." But the storm grew louder. Promoters whispered of suspensions. Politicians demanded stricter rules. Headlines screamed about the danger of unlicensed fighters infiltrating the sport. The machine was rewriting truth in real time. Justice in the cage was already fading under ink and authority. One night, the savage walked alone through alleys that smelled of rain and rust. A patrol car slowed, lights flashing briefly, then rolled on. A warning. He lit a cigarette, inhaling deep. His mind was calm, but his chest heavy. He whispered to himself, "They can take names. They can take papers. They can't take fists." Meanwhile, in smoky rooms above arenas, the real game unfolded. Promoters leaned across tables, their words clipped. "We'll spin him into the villain. Build the rematch as redemption. The fans will pay double to see him punished." Contracts slid across desks, judges bribed with quiet nods, referees promised with subtle gestures. The machine was set. The boy overheard enough to understand. He rushed to the savage, breathless. "They're setting you up. They'll call it fair, but it won't be. The rematch, they've already bought it." The savage didn't react. His face was stone. His voice low. "Then let them. The truth doesn't need judges." But the boy's fear burned. They don't care about truth. They care about profit. They'll bury you, and nobody will know. The savage stared into the distance, smoke curling from his lips. Some truths survive even buried. The boy wanted to argue, wanted to scream, but silence fell heavy. He knew the savage wouldn't bend. His code wouldn't allow it. Across the city, the fighter trained in secrecy, jaw healing, rage sharpening. His pride demanded revenge, but his backers demanded more. They wanted spectacle, redemption, profit. They promised him everything, so long as he played their game. And he agreed. "I'll break him in the cage," he growled. "And this time, the world will call it justice." But justice was gone. Justice had been stripped, twisted, rewritten by those with power. The savage's fists had delivered it once, but the system had stolen it, reshaping the narrative until he was villain and the fighter was victim. When authorities arrive, they don't always carry handcuffs. Sometimes they carry pens. And pens can cut deeper than fists. The cage had spoken, but the world refused to listen. The savage's fists had silenced arrogance, but outside the arena, another battle raged. One fought not with blows, but with words, headlines, and the roar of unseen millions. It began online. The knockout clip looped endlessly, uploaded from every angle, slowed down, sped up, dissected frame by frame. Some called it poetry. Others called it a crime. Hashtags erupted. Hashtags collided. Hashtag street justice trended beside hashtag ban the savage. The internet became a coliseum where fans threw digital stones, each one sharper than the last. On talk shows, polished commentators leaned forward, voices grave. "He's dangerous," one said, shaking his head. "Unlicensed. Uncontrolled. What message does it send if we celebrate this kind of chaos?" Another leaned back, smirking. "Or maybe he's exactly what the sport needs, raw, unfiltered, a man who can't be bought." The debate sold advertisements, filled airtime, and blurred truth until opinion replaced fact. In bars, voices rose. Some cheered the savage as a hero. He stood up. He gave that arrogant fool what he deserved. Others cursed him as a thug. No discipline. No respect for the sport. He doesn't belong in a cage. Arguments spilled into fists, fights breaking out in parking lots, blood mirroring the chaos on screen. The slap had sparked a storm. The knockout had fanned it into wildfire. The fighter, jaw wired and bruised, watched it all from his hospital bed. The internet had painted him both victim and villain. Clips of him mocking opponents resurfaced, his arrogance replayed like evidence against him. Yet headlines softened his edges. "A champion wronged. Street brawler exploits the system." Promoters pushed carefully crafted interviews, his voice shaky, his tone humble, words fed by handlers. "I respect the sport. I respect my opponents." But what happened that night wasn't real fighting. It was a crime. The boy, scrolling through feeds, felt rage coil in his chest. He saw the lies spread, saw the savage painted as a monster. "They're twisting it," he muttered, fists clenched. "They're making him into something he's not." The savage didn't look at screens. He sat in silence, cigarette smoke rising. "Let them talk," he said softly. "The truth doesn't vanish because someone shouts louder." But the boy shook his head. "It does. People believe what they're told. And right now, they're being told you're the villain." And in many eyes, he was. Posters appeared online, the fighter's face heroic, the savage's shadow looming behind. Documentaries rushed to air, edited clips slicing away context, replaying only the knockout, only the violence, never the slap that sparked it. The machine didn't just twist the story, it erased the beginning. Politicians weighed in, seizing opportunity. "We must regulate these underground elements," one barked from a podium. "We cannot let savages pollute the integrity of combat sports." Applause followed. Cameras flashed. Votes tallied silently. Yet on the streets, whispers told a different story. Men in alleys remembered the arrogance broken, the justice delivered. Kids with bruised faces whispered of the savage like a folk hero. To them, he wasn't villain or saint. He was proof that power could be checked. That a slap didn't have to be the end. Still, the louder voices drowned the softer ones. Public opinion became courtroom, jury, and executioner. Every headline a verdict, every post a sentence. And the machine smiled, because controversy sells more than truth. Promoters leaned into it, building the narrative. Press releases crafted the fight as unfinished business. The fighter's face plastered across billboards, eyes filled with redemption. The savage reduced to silhouette, nameless, faceless, branded the menace. The crowd ate it up, buying tickets not for fairness, but for spectacle. The boy tried to speak out. He posted the truth, told the story of the slap, of the arrogance, of the justice that followed. But his words drowned in noise. For every supporter, 10 more screamed insults. His messages buried under waves of bots and trolls funded by those who needed the savage's downfall. He confronted the savage one night. "You can't just sit in silence. You have to fight back. Tell your story. Let them know who you are." The savage's eyes were calm, steady. "My story isn't told in words. It's told in fists. And they've already heard it once." The boy's voice cracked with frustration. "But they'll bury you. They'll erase everything you did." The savage exhaled smoke. "They can bury me. But scars don't lie." The world spun louder. Fans argued, reporters lied, promoters schemed. The savage remained still, his silence infuriating those who thrived on noise. His refusal to play the game only made the machine push harder, branding him more dangerous, more reckless, more villain. The fighter, healed enough to speak without wires, appeared on live television. His voice was measured, humble, every word rehearsed. "I don't hate him. I pity him. He doesn't understand what it means to be a professional. He doesn't understand respect. But I'll show him. I'll bring order back to the sport." Applause erupted. Tears glistened in audience eyes. The narrative was complete. He was no longer the arrogant king. He was the fallen hero, ready to rise. The boy slammed his fist against the table, screaming at the screen. Lies. All lies. But his voice was only one against millions. The savage listened in silence, then muttered, "Heroes wear masks. Sometimes villains tell the truth. Don't confuse the costume for the man." But the truth didn't matter anymore. Public opinion had become judge, and the sentence was clear. The savage would be fed back into the cage, not for justice, but for punishment. The rematch wasn't about fighting. It was about narrative, profit, and control. The court of public opinion had spoken, and its verdict was corruption dressed as redemption. In smoky boardrooms where blinds were always drawn and the air stank of cigars, men in expensive suits leaned forward over mahogany tables. Their faces weren't marked by scars or swollen jaws. Their hands weren't broken from punches. Their battleground wasn't cages or alleys. It was contracts, clauses, and dollars. The fight had shaken their empire. One clean fist from a man without license had toppled their golden king. Sponsors called, nervous. Politicians demanded answers. Fans demanded a rematch. And the promoters, perched atop their empire of blood and spectacle, smelled both danger and opportunity. One man slammed his palm against the table. "We can't let this stand. If a street thug can humiliate our champion, what does that say about the sport?" Another leaned back, exhaling smoke. "It says business is booming. Look at the numbers. Views through the roof. Headlines everywhere. People are paying attention." The first man snarled. "Attention isn't respect. If we let this savage keep winning, we lose control." Control. That was the word that mattered most. The cage wasn't built for fighters. It was built for promoters. They owned the stories, they owned the contracts, they owned the judges who decided when fists weren't enough. And now, a man with no leash had walked in and rewritten their script with blood. The dilemma was sharp. Bury him or exploit him. Burying him was simple. Suspend him, revoke him, smear him until no commission would touch his name. But burying him meant leaving money on the table. Exploiting him meant risk, letting the villain live long enough to fill their pockets. They debated for hours, voices colliding like punches. Spin him as a criminal. Spin him as unstoppable. Feed him to our champion again. Feed him to someone else first. Their words dripped with greed, but beneath it all lay fear. The savage couldn't be bought. He didn't play their game. He didn't bend to headlines or handlers. He was a ghost they couldn't chain. And ghosts are bad for business. Finally, one voice cut through the noise. "We don't bury him. Not yet. We feed him. Slowly. We give the fans what they want. A rematch. Redemption. And when the time comes, we make sure the result is ours." The room fell silent. Heads nodded. The decision was made. Not for truth. Not for justice. For profit. For control. Behind closed doors, they met with the fighter. His jaw still stiff, his pride still bleeding, but his eyes burned with vengeance. "We'll give you what you want," the promoters said. "A second chance. But this time, we'll make sure the story ends the right way." The fighter leaned forward, fists clenched. "I don't want story. I want him broken." "Then you'll have both," they promised. But promises in that room never came free. Judges would be briefed. Referees would be chosen carefully. Narratives would be rehearsed. And if fists failed, pens would finish the job. Meanwhile, the savage sat in silence, unaware of the machinery grinding against him. He didn't scheme, didn't plot. He lived by his code, and his code was simple. But the boy saw it clearly. He had overheard whispers, read contracts, seen headlines. He rushed to the savage, panic in his voice. "They're setting you up. The rematch, it's already fixed." The savage lit a cigarette, eyes calm. "All fights are fixed. Only the fists are real." The boy shook his head, frustration sharp. "You don't understand. They'll never let you win. Not again." The savage exhaled smoke. "Winning isn't the point. Standing is." The boy's voice cracked. "But they'll bury you." The savage's eyes met his, steady, heavy. "Then bury me standing." That was the difference between them. The boy wanted fairness. The savage had abandoned that dream long ago. Injustice was constant. His code didn't promise victory, it promised resistance. Back in the boardroom, promoters polished their plan. Press conferences were scheduled. Posters designed. The fighter's image cast in heroic light, the savage's silhouette painted in shadow. Reporters were briefed, interviews rehearsed. The narrative was ironclad: redemption versus menace, order versus chaos. But beneath their polished smiles, fear lingered. What if the savage broke the script again? What if his fists shattered their carefully built story one more time? They needed guarantees. They needed to tighten chains. So they made calls. Judges with debts. Referees with ambitions. Politicians who needed campaign funds. Each one promised silence or bias, their price paid in envelopes and favors. The machine spun smoothly, gears greased with corruption. The fighter trained harder than ever, fueled not by discipline but by rage. Every punch he threw, every kick he landed, he imagined the savage's face. He whispered to himself at night, "This time, no mistakes. This time, I finish him." His arrogance had transformed into obsession, and obsession is sharper than pride. The boy watched from the shadows, his heart sinking. He wanted to believe the savage's code could withstand the machine, but fear gnawed at him. He had seen too much. He knew the game was already lost before it began. The savage, however, remained calm. He walked the streets at night, smoke curling, footsteps steady. He whispered to himself, as he always had, "Never start it. Never step back." His scars reminded him that battles weren't won in headlines. They were won in silence, in moments when fists met flesh, when pride broke under truth. The promoters called their plan perfect. The fans called it destiny. The fighter called it revenge. But the savage called it nothing. To him, it was just another fight. Another injustice to face. Another chain to break. And as the city buzzed with anticipation, the dilemma of the promoters twisted into something darker. They wanted profit. They wanted control. But in trying to bury the savage, they had created something they couldn't contain. A storm built on silence, fists, and an unbreakable code. The dilemma wasn't his. It was theirs. Because if he shattered their script again, their empire would bleed. The rematch wasn't born in the cage. It was born in boardrooms, whispered through phone lines, sealed with signatures on contracts that smelled of ink and corruption. The posters showed redemption. The headlines screamed destiny. But under the glossy surface, the trap was already tightening. The savage walked through the storm in silence. Reporters swarmed him, microphones sharp as daggers. "What do you have to say about your last fight? Do you regret it? Are you ready for the rematch?" Each question dripped with venom, designed to bait, to twist. He answered none. His silence was his shield, his cigarette smoke his curtain. The boy at his side wanted to shout back, to fight words with words. But the savage only muttered, "Don't waste breath on noise." Inside the machine, the plan sharpened. Judges were chosen, men with debts and loyalties already purchased. Referees briefed in back rooms, told when to look away and when to interfere. Promoters rehearsed their lines, spinning redemption as justice and painting the savage as chaos incarnate. This time, they promised sponsors, the right story will be told. The fighter trained under lights, every punch fueled by vengeance. Cameras followed him, capturing sweat and grit, his voice humble but sharp. "I've learned. I've grown. I'll bring order back." He spoke of discipline, of respect, of redemption. But behind the words, His eyes burned with obsession. He didn't want order. He wanted revenge. The boy watched the press conference, heart pounding with rage. The fighter sat on stage, smiling, jaw heeled, arrogance cloaked in humility. Reporters applauded. Promoters beamed. And beside him, the savage sat in silence, his presence heavy, his expression unreadable. When a journalist asked, "Do you have any words for your opponent?" the savage only leaned into the microphone and whispered, "We'll let the fists speak." The crowd erupted. Some cheered. Some booed. The promoters smiled. Silence made him easy to twist. Headline spun instantly. Savage refuses to show respect. Street brawler or menace. The machine worked overtime, crafting villainy out of silence. The boy pulled him aside afterward. "They've already written the ending. You can't win." The savage lit a cigarette, smoke curling into the night air. "I don't fight for endings. I fight for moments." Fight night arrived heavy with anticipation. The arena pulsed with energy, the smell of beer, sweat, and neon lights mixing into something electric. Fans waved signs, chanting, divided into two storms colliding under one roof. Some screamed for redemption. Others screamed for justice. But above them all, the promoters smiled. Every ticket sold, every camera rolling, every dollar earned. Backstage, the fighter wrapped his hands slowly, muttering promises under his breath. "Tonight, I erase him." His team nodded, feeding the fire. The savage sat quietly in his corner, gloves resting on his knees. He closed his eyes, breathing slow. No music in his ears. No cameras allowed. Just silence, heavy and sacred. The boy stood nearby, wringing his hands. "They'll rob you," he whispered. The savage opened his eyes, calm and cold. "Then let them. A robbed man still stands taller than a liar." The walkouts began. The fighter strutted down the aisle, lights blazing, crowd roaring. He raised his hands, soaking in adoration, every step rehearsed. The cameras ate it up. Redemption packaged neatly. Then the savage emerged. No theatrics. No entourage. Just a slow walk under dim light, his eyes fixed forward, ignoring the boos, ignoring the chants. He didn't come for applause. He came for truth. Inside the cage, the referee called them forward. His voice firm, rehearsed. "Protect yourselves at all times. Follow my commands." But his eyes lingered too long on the savage, a warning buried beneath the rules. The bell rang. The fighter exploded forward, sharp, controlled, disciplined. His jabs crisp, his footwork clean. The crowd roared approval. Commentators praised his improvement, his newfound respect. But beneath the praise, the savage felt the trap tightening. Every time he pressed forward, the referee stepped in, breaking the rhythm, resetting the fight. Every close exchange interrupted. Every near finish stalled. The fighter was being protected, hidden behind whistles and waves. Still, the savage stayed calm. He absorbed punches, deflected shots, waiting for the storm to break. His code didn't bend. His eyes never wavered. Midway through the round, he saw it, the same opening, the same arrogance creeping back. The fighter threw wide, and the savage countered sharp. His fist cracked across the jaw, staggering the fighter. The crowd gasped, déjà vu thick in the air. The savage stepped forward to finish. But the referee dove in, arms out. "Illegal!" he shouted. The crowd erupted in confusion. Commentators scrambled. Did he hit behind the head? Was that after the break? The replay told the truth. It was clean. But the machine didn't care about truth. The referee deducted points, warning the savage as the fighter recovered in his corner. The boy screamed from cage side, veins bulging in his neck. That was clean. Everyone saw it. But his voice drowned in chaos. The trap was visible now. They wouldn't let the savage win, not without a script. The second round began with the same pattern. The fighter striking safe, the referee breaking clinches early, stalling momentum. The savage landed shots, but each time, the officials found excuses. Low blow warnings, elbows too sharp, accusations of headbutts. None were true. All were enough. The crowd grew restless. Some booed. Some cheered. Confusion spread like fire. The boy gripped the cage, eyes wide, tears burning. "They're stealing it." The savage felt it too, but he didn't rage. His face stayed calm, his fists steady. He whispered to himself between rounds, "Never step back." The third round came. Both men bloodied, both breathing heavy. The fighter threw combinations, desperate, pride fueling him. The savage countered, relentless, but every blow met with whistles, every surge broken. The trap was working. The final bell rang. The crowd stood, divided, screaming. The savage raised no hands. The fighter collapsed into his corner, chest heaving, sweat dripping. Judges scribbled. Promoters smiled. When the decision was read, the verdict echoed like betrayal. Winner by unanimous decision. The name rang out, not his. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, others in rage. The boy screamed, voice breaking, "Robbery!" The savage stood silent, eyes steady, as the fighter raised his arms, basking in false redemption. Cameras captured the moment, headlines already written. Justice had been buried under paper, under corruption, under the trap. The boy rushed to him, tears streaming. "They stole it. They stole everything." The savage exhaled smoke, voice low, steady. "They can steal stories. They can't steal truth." But as the arena roared, as the fighters celebrated, as promoters shook hands, the savage knew the war wasn't over. The machine had set the trap, and tonight it had sprung. But scars don't lie. And scars always demand remembrance. The arena emptied slowly, the cheers still echoing, the smell of sweat and spilled beer clinging to the concrete. The fighter stood on stage, arms raised, cameras flashing. His jaw bruised, his body battered, but his smile wide. He was the victor, at least on paper. Promoters shook hands, broadcasters shouted into microphones, headlines were drafted before the crowd even reached their cars. Redemption complete. Order restored. But outside the lights, in the corridors where shadows stretched long and silence pressed heavy, the savage walked alone. No entourage. No celebration. Just smoke curling from his lips, his eyes steady, his fists raw. He had felt the trap from the first bell. He had seen the referee's hesitation, the judge's pen scratching long before the final punch landed. The machine had done its work. The boy caught up, chest heaving, face red with rage. "They stole it," he shouted. Everyone saw it. The crowd booed. "They know the truth." The savage stopped, exhaling smoke slowly. His voice was calm. "Truth doesn't live in their papers. It lives here." He tapped his chest, then his scarred fists. The boy shook his head, tears burning his eyes. "What good is truth if nobody hears it?" The savage's gaze cut through him. Truth doesn't need ears. It needs memory. And memory outlives lies. Outside, the fighter was paraded before cameras, his words humble, rehearsed. "I respect him. He's tough. But tonight, order won." The crowd roared. Reporters scribbled. Promoters grinned. But beneath his calm words, his eyes flickered. He knew. Deep inside, he knew the fists had told a different story. Pride had been broken again, only saved by paper and politics. In smoky bars across the city, arguments raged. Some fans slammed fists on tables, shouting, "Robbery!" Others defended the verdict, clinging to the narrative sold to them. Fights broke out in parking lots, glass shattered, sirens wailed. The slap that started it all had birthed chaos that now stretched across the city. The savage didn't return to the gym. He walked the alleys instead, where faces appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Kids whispered his name. Old men nodded in quiet respect. To them, he wasn't villain or hero. He was proof. Proof that fists could still speak louder than corruption, even if pens rewrote the story. The boy walked beside him, silence heavy between them. Finally, he asked, "Will you fight again?" The savage lit another cigarette, eyes lost in the glow of streetlights. "Maybe. Maybe not. The fight's not in cages. It's in streets. It's in lives. As long as men abuse power, there'll always be another fight." The boy swallowed hard. "And if they come for you?" The savage's lips curled faintly, not a smile, not a smirk. "Let them. I've been hunted all my life. Chains break. Lies fade. Scars stay. Across the city, in boardrooms, promoters congratulated themselves. They had survived the storm, bent the narrative, pocketed their profits. But cracks lingered. Fans didn't forget so easily. Clips of clean counters, of referee interference, spread online. Whispers grew louder. The machine had won the night, but seeds of doubt had been planted. The fighter celebrated publicly, but alone, his reflection mocked him. He replayed the fight in silence, saw himself stagger, saw himself nearly broken again. His fists trembled. His pride whispered that he hadn't truly won. Redemption built on corruption was no redemption at all. And pride, once cracked, never heals clean. The savage, meanwhile, walked through rain-slick streets, his boots splashing through puddles, the boy trailing close. The city felt different now, tense, suspicious, awake. Everywhere he went, eyes followed. Some with hate, some with respect, some with fear. He had become more than man, more than fighter. He was symbol. And symbols can't be buried by decisions read in hurried voices. He stopped under a flickering streetlight, smoke rising, rain dripping off his jacket. He whispered to himself, "Never start it. Never step back. Never leave the weak behind." His code, unbroken, unbent, carried him forward. The boy looked up at him, eyes wide. "So this is it." The savage shook his head slowly. "No. This is just another scar. And scars tell stories the liars can't erase." In that moment, the injustice of the night, the corruption of the machine, the roar of false redemption, all of it felt smaller. Because the savage's silence carried weight no headline could match. His fists had spoken once, twice, and though robbed on paper, the truth was carved into memory. The story wasn't about cages or contracts anymore. It was about survival. About a boy who learned that dignity could be defended. About a savage who refused to kneel to arrogance or corruption. About scars that outlived lies. And as the city slept uneasy, the savage vanished back into shadows, leaving behind no celebration, no interviews, no quotes, only silence. A silence heavier than cheers, sharper than headlines, and longer lasting than any decision read by trembling judges. Because redemption doesn't always wear gold. Sometimes it wears scars. Sometimes it hides in alleys. Sometimes it walks away, unclaimed, undefeated, untold by anyone except those who saw, those who felt, those who will never forget. And though the machine thought it had won, though papers wrote their false endings, the truth lingered in whispers, in memories, in scars. The savage didn't need their stage. He carried his own. The slap that started it all had birthed injustice, chaos, corruption. But it also birthed something stronger. Proof that silence can defy noise, that fists can defy pens, that scars can defy lies. And for those who watched, for those who remembered, that proof was enough. Don't forget to comment where you're watching from, like this video, and subscribe for more stories.